What's up guys, it's your boy Lordology here, and in today's video I want to take on the monumental task of ranking and giving my thoughts on each of the Batman Arkham games. Now I would like to preface this by saying that I don't believe that there is a bad game in the Arkham franchise, and that each game stands on their own as being fantastic superhero experiences, with each game being unique in their own right, as well as showcasing what Rocksteady and Warner Brothers were once capable of before Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad. Now my thoughts on each of the games has definitely changed a lot over the years, and I know that some of my rankings some may disagree with, but I do have my reasons for placing the games in their respective positions, which I will elaborate on further in the video. And with that being said, let's get into it. Coming in at number 4, we have Batman Arkham Knight, the last entry of the mainline Arkham trilogy from Rocksteady, and my least favourite game in the franchise. Now, saying Knight is my least favourite in the franchise doesn't necessarily mean that Knight is a bad game per se. After all, it has arguably one of the most beautiful open worlds in any Arkham game, as well as any superhero game for that matter. And graphically speaking, Knight still holds up really well, and still looks like a game that could be released today, and it would still get praised for how gorgeous it is. I should also mention that in terms of gameplay, Knight does the best job of being the quintessential Batman simulator, with having a big open world, all of Batman's gadgets and toys, including the Batmobile, and some of the best combat and stealth abilities in the entire franchise. Now when it comes to the issues of Arkham Knight, there is many that hamper my overall experience with the game compared to the other entries in this franchise. Arkham Knight seems to suffer from half-assed side missions that give us underwhelming payoffs for quests and villains that have carried over from previous entries, and it doesn't seem to know what it wants to do with its narrative. For example, the way that Deathstroke is handled in this game is downright laughable. As both a fan of the Batman comics and games, I know fully well that Deathstroke is arguably one of the only villains that can take on Batman in a hand-to-hand fight. And the fact that the final boss fight for Deathstroke is fighting him with a tank is absolutely ridiculous. And if I'm being quite honest, very lazy on Rocksteady's part. Deathstroke isn't the only culprit of this strange mission design. Just take a look at how Hush was handled in Arkham Knight, with his interesting questline being carried over from Arkham City and ending in the most boring and bland way possible. There are of course other examples of this, like the Firefly missions, and having to chase this annoying bug around Gotham City and literally doing the same thing over and over again. Even the Man-Bat and Penguin side quests suffer from this issue, though at least in Man-Bat's case, there's an interesting story tied to its bland mission design. And arguably my biggest gripe with Knight has to be the over-reliance on the Batmobile, and the fact that every single challenge in this game, whether it be with a main or side mission, needs the Batmobile to progress in some way, instead of it being a cool addition that we should be able to use when we want, and not rely on it for literally everything. Now as for the main narrative of Knight, it seems confused and not as concise in its ability to tell a story in the same way as previous entries in the franchise. The reveal of the Arkham Knight being Jason Todd is predictable and doesn't affect the story in any meaningful way, except for the very end because the writers just had to justify his existence in some way. Now Scarecrow on the other hand is a really interesting villain and a welcome change from the Joker-centric stories that came before. But of course this lasted all of 2 seconds, as before you know it, there's the Joker showing up as a side effect from Scarecrow's toxin. When I first played the game, I was really looking forward to a game without the influence of the Joker, and when I saw him show up, I was more disappointed than anything else, because it just seemed like Rocksteady couldn't move on after having the balls to kill his character off in City. And I would like to mention that there is some good dialogue with Toxin Joker throughout the game, but again, having him as the main villain again is just dumb in my opinion, as the man's already gone and there's a ton of interesting villains in Batman's rogue gallery that should have been utilized more effectively in the game. There is of course other issues I have with the game, like killing off and then bringing back Barbara Gordon in the final hour, because God forbid Rocksteady do something ballsy with their storytelling. The point I'm trying to make here is that Knight should have been the biggest and best in the franchise, and instead of trying to be both, it ends up settling for being the biggest, as it struggles to tell a concise narrative compared to the other games in the franchise. Knight isn't a bad game by any means, as I have pointed out, but it does have many flaws, which is why I place it last on my list. Coming in at number 3, we have Batman Arkham Asylum, the very first game in the Arkham franchise, and the game that made the wise decision to cast the late legendary Kevin Conroy as Batman, and Mark Hamill's fantastic take on the Joker. from the amazing Batman animated series, for which the Arkham games are heavily inspired by. Asylum brings back the feeling of the 90s animated series with a dark and gritty tone, and from the moment you enter the Asylum, the atmosphere of this game is just phenomenal. And this is the game that first made you feel like you were playing as Batman, with a combat system that was easy to learn and hard to master, which would go on to inspire many other games like the Middle-earth Shadow games and the more recent Marvel Spider-Man games. One of my personal favourite parts of playing Asylum is definitely the introduction of Scarecrow, being the super creepy loner who stalks Batman around the asylum as Batman tries to stop the Joker's plans, and eventually our boy Scarecrow had karma catch up to him in the shape of a big green crocodile that would make any Aussie reptile question their own existence. The whole story revolving around Batman trying to uncover what the Joker is planning is a really good one, with many cool villains making appearances and with the backdrop of the asylum being the environment you're stuck in, with guards and doctors being killed around you. It just makes for a great Batman experience. Asylum is of course not without its faults though, and this is mainly because of the game not aging as well as other games in the franchise. The boss fights in Asylum are quite boring and basic, and have you using the same tactic to defeat them, whether it's a Titan-powered Thug, a Titan-powered Bane, or hell, even a Titan-powered Joker, which is arguably the second worst boss fight in the franchise, only being topped by Deathstroke from Arkham Knight. Even the way gadgets work, with the traversal of the asylum and the ability tree, and it's just all very limited and hasn't aged very well. And while it does a much better job with its narrative compared to Knight, it suffers when it comes to its overall gameplay, and the final act of Asylum struggles to put together any interesting boss fights. As mentioned before, once you learn how to fight a Titan Thug, there's literally no more learning curve with the game, with the only unique boss fights being against Poison Ivy and Scarecrow. The Zaz encounters are not really anything to write home about, and with Harley, she just sends goons after you, and Killer Croc has you running away like the Aussie version of Crash Bandicoot. Overall though, Asylum is an iconic game, not just in the franchise, but in superhero games as a genre. And while it seems like I'm being slightly negative here, I'm only pointing out the flaws to best describe why I'm ranking the games the way I am. Coming in at number 2, we have Batman Arkham Origins, the only game in the franchise created by Warner Brothers instead of Rocksteady, and the only game to not have Kevin Conroy voicing Batman. Origins is considered by many fans to be the worst in the franchise, which I very much disagree with. There's a lot to like about Arkham Origins, which is why I have it ranked second on my list. The game has an excellent Christmas setting with a very unique soundtrack, and shows us a very young and inexperienced Bruce Wayne, who has no issue beating up both criminals and corrupt cops alike. Origins also has the best detective mechanics in the entire franchise, like in the main missions where you have to discover what happened to Black Mask, with examining clues and recreating the crime scene, and the underrated case files that have Batman using his detective skills around Gotham to solve homicide cases. There's one particular case that really stands out to me, with Batman finding two close friends of his being murdered in the same place that his parents were, and him discovering that the person who killed his friends is actually someone he knows personally, and when he catches him, the anger in Bruce's voice is palpable, and makes this version of Batman feel much more personal and raw with his emotions. There are other examples of this in the game, like when Alfred tries to stop Bruce from facing the assassins hunting him, and he, in a very respectful way, reminds Alfred that he is no longer the boy he once knew, and has become fear personified in the hearts and minds of criminals and the corrupt. And yes, I am quoting The Excellent Batman Begins. It's story elements like this that make me really enjoy Origins much more than both Knight and Asylum. And I would also like to mention that Origins is the only game in the franchise that actually has an explorable Batcave, with poster clippings around the cave of crimes Batman has solved, with a training ground and Batmobile under construction. And the ability to get unique dialogue with Alfred directly throughout the game is an awesome touch, and something that's missing from other games in the franchise. Origins also has some of my favourite boss fights in the franchise as well, with the excellent Deathstroke boss fight, which has Batman and Deathstroke go hand to hand in a visually spectacular fight, which just shows how dangerous these two men actually are. And pulling off this boss fight without taking a hit or failing a counter just shows how well choreographed this fight actually is. Hell, even the way Bane is handled in Origins is really cool, and having him be this super competent enemy is awesome. And he truly feels like an actual threat to Batman whenever he's around, compared to how he is in the other games. The Shiva boss fight is also very underrated too, with different types of counters and the flow of combat being very different compared to other enemies in the game, which makes for a fun fight that feels quite unique. The overall gameplay in Origins is mostly the same as the other games, but it has some cool gadgets that make it feel different too, like the shock gloves and the remote claw, which makes combat and stealth feel unique and gives much more opportunities to take down enemies. Even the way the Joker is handled in this game I really like, with story elements being borrowed directly from the Killing Joke comic book, with some really cool concepts of why the Joker became who he is, and why he's so obsessed with Batman. And also I have to mention, it also showcases the beginning of the toxic relationship between Joker and Harley. Origins is not without its issues though. Of all the games in the franchise, this is the one that was most buggy for me. With some of my playthroughs, all the gadgets that I had obtained in the story completely disappearing from my inventory, and having no way to fix it but restart was quite frustrating. And half of the open world of Origins is basically just a reskin of Arkham City's map, with the southern part of the map being the only unique part of the game, with the Gotham Royal Hotel in the Diamond District. Origins also suffers from the same issue as Night and Asylum, which is that it relies too much on the Joker, and while I do enjoy the way he was handled in this game, I also think that having him take over Black Mask's operation so easily was laughable, and it's part of the story that I'm not actually a fan of. Overall though, Origins has always been the underrated and forgotten game in this franchise, and quite frankly, it has no reason to be, as it stands on its own 2 feet as being a unique Batman experience with an interesting story, and a different take on the Batman that we know and love from the other entries in the franchise. Coming in at number 1, we have Batman Arkham City. Come on guys, did you really think there was going to be another number 1? City was the much anticipated follow-up to Asylum, and boy did Rocksteady deliver on this one. Not only is City the best superhero game of all time, but it's also one of the greatest games of all time. From the moment the game opens with a shock and a white screen, as you hear the deep voice of Hugo Strange, you just know you're in for a wild ride. Arkham City is Rocksteady at their absolute best. The story and characters of City are absolutely phenomenal. From start to finish, all the characters in this game have been voiced superbly well. From the moment you escape Penguin's grasp and knock him out, to saving Catwoman from Two-Face in the courthouse, and having some excellent flirty dialogue with her, and Joker trying to assassinate her while coughing up a lung like Arthur Morgan, to finding this mysterious watcher who's been stalking Batman, which adds a level of paranoia to this Supermax prism, to finding out Joker has been poisoned from the Titan formula, and the Joker himself injecting Batman with his own blood to poison him too, with Mark Hamill's sick and desperate Joker so well acted that I forgot that this is actually a video game, and even Harley Quinn giving a stellar performance in all her scenes. There isn't a single wasted character in this game. Every ally and villain is utilized extremely well given the time constraints of the game taking place in one night, which adds to the urgency of Batman trying to find a cure before him and the Joker both die together. The boss fights in this game are extremely well choreographed. The Clayface, Mr. Freeze and Ra's al Ghul boss fights are major standouts for me, and one of the main reasons why I love this game so much is that the Joker isn't the main villain behind all the events of the game, nor is he involved with Protocol 10, all of which were orchestrated by Hugo Strange and Ra's al Ghul, which also gives the story much more emotional weight since Batman is in love with Raz's daughter Talia, who makes several appearances in the game when Batman is trying to discover a cure using Ra's al Ghul's blood. Even the side missions are all well done, with all the Riddler challenges giving us really cool puzzles and Easter eggs from the franchise, and when you finally catch the Riddler and humiliate him for all the pain he's caused, it's honestly quite satisfying. The phone calls with Zsasz are chilling, as he describes how he has taken 2 people hostage and you have to pinpoint his location as he gives Batman an insight into his messed up mind. The Deadshot side mission is great too, with even getting to see Deadshot at the start of the game and having him hunting down targets is a really nice touch on Rocksteady's part, and this blending of main and side mission together is just really well done. The Mad Hatter mission has Batman hypnotized, with Mad Hatter trying to turn Batman into his puppet, and of course I have to mention my favourite side mission in the game, being the Identity Killer, who can actually be seen early in the game at the church, sleeping comfortably, and when the radio next to him mentions Bruce Wayne's name, he grumbles his displeasure, and then discovering the bodies of his victims with missing faces, with Oracle questioning Batman's sanity, and wondering if he is the one behind it all, to discovering that the man behind it all is actually Batman's long-lost friend Tommy Elliot, who is trying to make himself look like Bruce Wayne. The gameplay with its stealth and combat improves on what Asylum did in every conceivable way. Batman is faster, hits harder, can do much more complex stealth takedowns, and has much more interesting combat and gadget abilities. The open world of Arkham City is also a standout, with the game not feeling too big or small, with a decent amount of buildings to explore, with lots of secrets and Easter eggs to discover. All the while listening to all the inmates talking about the events of the game, and their reactions and opinions on what the super criminals of Gotham are up to, as well as where their overall allegiances lie. One thing that City does better than all the other games in the franchise is it takes risks. It kills off Batman's love interest, as well as having Joker being killed in the final act of the game, with Batman telling him, "Even after everything you've done, I would have saved you," and Joker succumbing to his poisoned blood with his last laugh. It's just all so well done, and to be honest, I don't think we're ever going to see a game like City made again, especially from Rocksteady, which is honestly a very real shame. Now, one of the main complaints I hear about City is that it has way too many Riddler trophies, and honestly, I do agree with that, as City has more trophies and challenges than any of the other Arkham games, which can put a lot of people off on trying to 100% the game, as well as trying to find the Riddler as well. But with the amount of dialogue, lore, and missions you get for doing the Riddler challenges, it's just all worth it to me. Overall, Arkham City is the best in this franchise by a mile, and my opinion on that has not changed. Even playing these games for as long as I have, which is well over a decade now, Arkham City still is the absolute reigning champ of the Arkham games. Before I finish up, I wanted to say what I like individually about each of the Batman Arkham games. As I've said before, I don't think there is a bad game in this franchise, and all of them can justifiably be your favourite, and I could see why. Now, Arkham Knight has the best gameplay and does the best job of making you feel like Batman in a big open world. Arkham Asylum has the best atmosphere and does the best job of emulating the feel of the 90s animated series. Arkham Origins has the best detective mechanics and has some of the best boss fights. And finally, Arkham City has the best story and has the best blend of both its gameplay, mechanics, and narrative. That's my final verdict of the Batman Arkham franchise, but now I want to hear what you guys think. Do you agree with my ranking and critiques on the Arkham games? Would you have ranked the games any differently or would have anything to add? Let me know in the comments section below, and I would also like to say a big thank you to my latest channel members for supporting me here on the channel. And with that being said, I hope you guys all have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Cheers.
It's done. Gotham is safe.
Thank you, Bruce. For everything.
Goodbye, Jim.